With so many different opportunities in the market, like you mentioned, NFTs, DeFi, gaming, what is your fund's thesis and how do you kind of make the decisions? Are you guys also going very broad or are you trying to stay concentrated?
Great question. So over the years, I always say there's the strategy bucket and then there's the analysis bucket, right? So looking at the analysis first, from an analysis perspective, we're very thematic because the crypto space itself is a thematic space that I think it's very unlike any other out there. And when I say thematic for those that are new to crypto, it just means that, let's say 5 years ago, there was just crypto. 3 years ago, people start segmenting with Bitcoin and altcoins, right? That was a very lazy way. And back then there was something called alt seasons, right?
Yeah.
Then over the last 2 years, 18 months maybe, this altcoin bucket started splitting off where there's multiple sub-sectors, sub-themes. For example, DeFi. Now, like for some reason, this crypto loves seasons, right? There was DeFi summer, right? Last summer, there was a season called DeFi summer where every DeFi project, essentially 10x, 20x, absurd returns. Meanwhile, Bitcoin didn't do anything, right? So these are like idiosyncratic rallies of specific themes or specific sectors. And we've gone from altcoins to now DeFi, Metaverse, and even within Metaverse, you could say there's play to earn gaming and there's NFTs, right? There's multiple subsegments now. And so from these themes, we try to identify, what's the next move? What is the next theme that the market will wake up to, pay attention to? And to me right now, we allocate to 5 core themes, which is one, DeFi, decentralized finance. That one has hit the mainstream fairly well. Same thing goes for the Metaverse. So DeFi and Metaverse are 2 of the 5 themes we allocate to. Again, both I think have hit the mainstream. People are somewhat familiar with them at this point. DeFi was on the cover of Fortune magazine at this point. The Metaverse is in the news every single day with, Snoop Dogg launching NFTs, Dolce & Gabbana launching NFTs. I mean, it's really hit the zeitgeist right now. I think, NFTs is probably one of the core cultural topics of 2021. So those are 2 themes we allocate to with the flagship fund. And then 3 more themes we allocate to as well are the decentralized web. So we call it DWeb. What that stands for essentially is decentralizing the entire internet experience. So the reason why Bitcoin is so strong is because no government in the world, no bank in the world could ever do something against it if they wanted to. Many wanted to shut it down. China seems to want to shut it down, but there's nothing they can do. Bitcoin keeps running, right? Even when China had it banned, there was like major investments coming from China because again, there's only so much you can do. So what needs to happen is that all this decentralized tech fully decentralizes. So right now you have decentralized finance like DeFi, right? Like decentralized exchanges, and the backend code is actually decentralized like Bitcoin is. The problem though is that the front ends, like the actual .coms that you go to, they're living on centralized servers like Amazon, right? So what DWeb does is it decentralizes the infrastructure itself so that you have decentralized hosting, like website hosting. You have decentralized online storage, decentralized cloud computing, decentralized DNS, like the domain name servers, like the .coms, because there have been times, even though they've been highly political, things like I think 8chan was literally taken down from the internet. Like you can no longer reach it because they took down the domain name, right? And so that you can do that through platforms like, Helium does broadband, Handshake does DNS. You have Arweave doing storage. Arweave actually had a really compelling story recently where the Chinese authorities wanted to shut down the Apple Daily News office in Hong Kong. And the writers there uploaded the stories to Arweave where the government could no longer erase them, right? So now you have this way and this is so beautiful because I'm really big into dystopian fiction, so much that I even wrote one myself, is that books like 1984 or Fahrenheit, I think 451, there's one of the common themes in dystopian fiction is book burning and changing the past, right? With things like Arweave, that becomes a thing of the past, so to say. That fear can go away because even if an authoritarian government wants to remove information, they can no longer do so with proper decentralized technologies. Anyway, so that was the 3rd theme. 4th theme would be privacy. One of the main reasons we invest in private infrastructure is that everything you do on blockchain today is fully transparent. Ethereum, Bitcoin, same thing. If I send you Ethereum from my wallet, you now know the public key to my wallet and you can see anything I've ever done, right? And that's just unthinkable when you think in traditional finance, because if you go to a restaurant and you swipe a credit card, do you really want the restaurant to know everything you've ever done? We as a culture, we're already so afraid and so fighting against Facebook's advertising practices and Facebook's privacy practices. Now imagine that every counterparty that you ever do a transaction with knows everything you've ever done. It's unthinkable. And sometimes people say, oh, but people don't care that much about privacy. Like this is just like a libertarian ideal. That's why I had to break privacy down into like, 3 perspectives. One, yes, it's the libertarian that wants privacy from the government. Okay, that's one bracket. Bracket 2 is the average person. Does the average teenager, a 20-year-old, really want their parents to see every transaction they ever do? No, right? Do you really want, so much is like keeping up with the Joneses? Imagine all those keeping up with the Joneses people, if all their neighbors would know their bank account balance, right? All of a sudden that fancy car in the driveway doesn't look that cool when the wallet is empty, right? So like, people want some kind of level of privacy even from each other in a totally non-criminal way, in a totally not anti-government way, just literally from each other, right? And then the third privacy need is actually institutional. Or if we do say that DeFi goes global, and if the whole world operates on DeFi, it's unthinkable that every large major institution is transparent. Every time Bridgewater, Rentec, or some of the big funds in the world make a single purchase, right? They would leak it to the entire world. They're like, oh, Rentec just started buying shares of this. Oh, Bridgewater just started, or BlackRock, is starting to purchase this and that, right? Yes, there's filings right now, but those filings are incredibly slow, right? They have them like on a quarterly basis. In DeFi and on blockchain, it's real time, meaning if one single block goes out and they purchase something, it's literally signal to the whole world. And this is happening in the crypto space already, where there's a platform called Nansen where you can literally track other crypto funds. So it's like, oh, Alameda's buying something, might want to jump in on that too, right? Oh, 3 Arrows is dumping something, better get out before they dump the rest of the tokens, right? And that becomes an actual financial risk, so to say, where then people might say, you know what? Yes, I am willing to pay money for the privacy of my transactions. So that's the privacy theme. And then last but not least, Web3. The reason I differentiate between Web3 and DWeb is infrastructure. Web3 are like layer ones like Ethereum, right? So Ethereum, Terra, Solana, that kind of bucket, right? Where we say this is the next internet, the backend of the next internet. In the past, people used to call it like, it's like an operating system. Those we allocate to as well because it's becoming more and more clear that the world will be multi-chain rather than just Ethereum. So we're betting on some potential competitors that might take market share.
So there's definitely, a handful of themes there. And I know that there's thousands of tokens out there. Mm-hmm. So what's some of the first things that you do to kind of identify some positions that you're going to look at for the portfolio?
Right. And I think that's where the themes help us well because, let's say you first arrive at the doors of CoinMarketCap or CoinGecko and you see the number at the top left. Oh, there's 12,000 coins out there. Right? Where do you start? So that's where the themes are great because now all of a sudden you conceptualize this whole market. You said, okay, now we've got different buckets. Okay. So let's start simple. Let's go to DeFi. Who are the biggest players in DeFi? Or like, you can either go by that or what I even prefer more, let's attack DeFi. What are some things that still need to happen? Right? So for example, let's say 3 months ago, we said, look, DEXs, that space is saturated. You already have so many decentralized exchanges, so many AMMs. There's no shortage of them, right? And now there's so many copycats, right? Same thing goes for yield aggregators and lenders. But something that still hadn't gone mainstream was futures exchanges, right? Decentralized futures. And you might even attack them even more so by saying, hey, right now Binance is kicking off US customers. They're kicking off even Europeans from using futures. So there will be demand for decentralized futures. All right, so we got our DeFi bucket. We go even a little bit closer. We say, hey, decentralized futures is what we're curious about. Let's look at every single one, right? So you research what exists out there. You've got DYDX, you've got Perp, you've got MCDEX, you've got FutureSwap, you've got GMX, you've got Vega, you've got, so we basically go down the list and we literally we start big, right? Crypto market, go smaller, DeFi, go smaller, decentralized futures. And then we literally look at everyone. And I could just, name like 8 off the top of my head. And I'm sure there's more, but we review every single one to identify our champions, so to say. And we say, look, this project is more than likely going to dominate the decentralized futures market. And then we make an allocation, right? And so we do that for every single micro segment. So that way our portfolio is composed of champions in every single little side category. And that way there's very little overlap. It's certainly not spray and pray, right? And we do end up with a large book. So right now we hold perhaps 40 different assets, but every single asset is hand selected that says like, okay, we got a winner in decentralized futures, in decentralized insurance, in decentralized debt tranches. And then that's just DeFi, right? Then we've got Metaverse. Well, we want to have our champion in play to earn. We want to have our champion in NFT marketplaces. We want to have our champion in fractionalizing NFTs, right? And then privacy, we've got, for example, like Secret Network doing a native privacy, right? It's an entirely private chain for smart contracts. And then we got another investment like Railgun that does privacy on Ethereum. So whether or not we go multi-chain or stay on ETH, we got to play in both. So that's kind of how we go about portfolio construction.